This drawing is about the saguaro cactus. You don't say the G is kind of like a W. Saguaro cactus. And for this drawing, in addition to your regular pencil, the good eraser on the end, you will also need some colors. And I'm recommending orange, yellow, and red, a light green and a dark green, a tan, and black. The saguaro cactus grows on only one place on the entire planet, and that is in the Sonoran Desert, which is located in the American Southwest. And Saguaro National Park is kind of in the Tucson, Arizona area. Here's another picture of some nice big saguaros. Of course, there's other cactuses that grow in the area. These are prickly pears down here. And you notice I said cactuses. You can use cacti as the plural, like 2 cacti, or you can say 2 cactuses, and either one is acceptable. And you might have some barrel cactuses around. There's some sagebrush. It's a pretty dry landscape. Here's a picture of Saguaro National Park with the sun going down. Now look here, all these saguaros, they don't have any arms. These are relatively young. You see how these are all armless? In fact, there's a whole field of armless saguaros. I don't see really arms on any of them. That just tells me that these saguaros are probably less than 30 years old, because a saguaro is a very long-lived plant. It can live to maybe 200 years old, they think. And it doesn't even grow arms until it's about 30 years old, and it doesn't begin to blossom and form flowers on the top till it's 40 or 50 years old. So because these guys lack arms, this is telling me these are relatively young. Now here we see a picture of some saguaros growing in front of a house. See, here's the road. This is the house back here. And I have to assume that these saguaros were not taken out of the desert, because the state of Arizona has had to really crack down on people taking these things out. Because they grow so slowly, people have realized it would be very easy to deplete the desert of these beautiful giants. And we don't want to do that. We want to keep Saguaro National Park healthy and keep a lot of these old saguaros in place. And so they've made it illegal to take these saguaros out of the desert. So these were probably grown, I hope, in some kind of a cactus nursery. And you can get them to grow arms more quickly if you water them more than they would get in their natural environment. So these may be not as old as they appear. Because they have arms, you think these things might be 50 years old. They might be less than that. So most people don't know that a cactus can actually tolerate more water than it gets in the desert, and it will grow more quickly if it gets more water. So the ones that people buy to put in their yards probably have received a lot more water, and they're not quite as old as they look. Here's another yard that's landscaped with some cacti. This kind of landscaping is called xeriscaping. Plants that do well in dry climates are called xerophytes, and that's X-E-R-O. So it sounds like it starts with a Z sound, but it actually begins with the letter X. So this is called xeriscaping. And it's the correct way to landscape. If you live out in Arizona in the desert, you shouldn't have grass in your yard. This is what you should have. So that house is landscaped appropriately for where it is. So here's a little chart I found about how fast a saguaro grows. When it's 10 years old, it's only going to be about 1 inch tall. That's like 2.5 centimeters. So that's only like the distance from my pencil tip to like here. 10 years old. And it'll be 1 foot tall, so that's about as tall as my pencil. I'm going to zoom out, but as tall as a piece of paper or as tall as a brand new pencil. It'll take 20 to 30 years to get that tall, as a piece of paper. And after 50 years, it maybe is as tall as a person. This says 3 feet tall, but I think they can get to 5 feet. So it'll take 50 years for a saguaro to be as tall as an average person. And then after 50, it'll start maybe making flowers and growing arms. This saguaro is 69 years old and it's getting its first flowers. This saguaro is 95 to 100 years old and it's getting a first branch. And it won't reach its full height until 200 years. Now the saguaro that we're going to draw is going to have a tiny arm and it's going to have some flowers because we want to talk about the botany of the flower. So we're going to have to put flowers on it. But it's going to be a little bit shorter maybe than it actually would. So it's going to be botanically 30 to 50 years old, but it may look a little bit shorter in our drawing. Now you see these dots. These are going to help you get your cactus in the right place because it has to be centered on the page and it has to stay away from these elements here. So find the top 2 dots. See those? Okay. And this is going to be like this. I'll try to zoom in a little bit on these top ones while we're drawing them. You see those? Like there's 2 really close down here. You do the right hand one. And this is where it's going to go up, straight, and then bend over a little bit like that. And then over here, this dot goes down to this first dot right here, like this. Make it kind of straight here along the side. There. Curve over a little bit like that. And then right here, from this dot to this next dot down here, this is where your little arm is going to go. So you can make a line there and there. Make kind of a curvy line like this. And then some kind of a bump off to the side. Yours doesn't have to look just like mine. Just some kind of a bump. Of course, the words here say saguaros don't sprout an arm until they're at least 30 years old. So our saguaro has to be at least that old. And then finish down to there like that. Now, this next piece here, these dots, they look nice and square because they are going to be. We're going to draw over here where these circle things are. We want to draw a cross section of what it looks like if you slice through the cactus. So we're going to draw like a plate of paper things that looks like it's slicing through so that we'll understand what these pictures are showing us. So these 2 little lines right here connect these, and over here like that, and then these 2 like that, and like this, and then across here, and then let's go ahead and finish down here. I'll come back to this in a second. Let's go ahead and finish down to our lower dot. What you want to do is imagine that this line here is going through like this. Don't draw it, but imagine it coming down like this and out the bottom like that. And same over here. And then make those lines connect to those 2 dots at the bottom. Like that. Like that. Don't be afraid to use that eraser if you want to replace your line. We'll worry about the bottom in a minute. Let's draw this in right here. I'm going to make a light guideline like this. Just nice, shallow, curvy line. Very light, so you just know where you're going. And then this is going to be kind of ripply because, as you know, saguaro cactus has like these ribs going down like this, right? So this is like a deep indent and then a bump, like so. These things go in there like that. So that's what we're going to draw. Well, these will be, the lines will come down like this. We want to draw this as kind of ripply. So my suggestion is to make kind of like a V-shaped thing here, like this. About that big as your finger or something. And then you're going to make some more going like this. And as you get closer to the edge, make them get a little bit smaller. And that will make it look like it's round. That'll help fool your eye into thinking the cactus is nice and round. In and out, in and out, in and out. Like that. And then where it goes in, that'll be where those lines go up. Like that. And you see how by making them smaller, we made it look like it's kind of going around a corner there. And then we could go ahead and extend these lines up like this. So I'll go straight up there, like that. Now let's see. The ones in the middle here, these lines aren't going to have to curve very much. Now don't make them go all the way up, just kind of let the lines kind of disappear. We're going to draw the top of the cactus at the end because we're going to be putting all kinds of flowers and buds on, so just kind of let them just disappear like that. Don't draw these lines too hard because like that I'm just going to change my mind there and move this line like this. It's always good to start out drawing very lightly. You can change your line. Now, the lines are actually places where it goes in, so if you would like to shade a little bit, we could make this look like a 3D bump. So you use your pencil on the side like this, tip your pencil over. Don't use it straight up and down, and then you can even use your finger a little bit. Fingers are a great help when you're doing a pencil drawing and you're trying to shade. When you get to the arm, I might even change the shape, my outer shape here. the stripes, the little bumps on the arm, they go like this. And they'll kind of go to the point like that. You might even put a little bit of bumpy like that, make the edge bumpy. And they're not going to be quite as deep. The ruts on the inside here aren't going to be as deep as on the main stem there. Now if you really want to make this even more real, you want to put a little shadow underneath the arm like this. And you can shade the bottom of the arm too. Make it a little bit darker. Still want to see that rut, but you can, or that indent there. See how you can make that whole bottom a little bit darker. And the same thing down here in this section. Kind of continue those same lines. Just imagine this line comes out down here at the same place. Imagine it going through. And then if you want to make this look like you've actually like slid a metal plate into your cactus, you can help fool the eye by putting a shadow underneath here like this. So if this cactus actually had a slicer in it, you would have a pretty heavy shadow right underneath it like that. And then you would also have these shadows like this going through here. You'd still have those indents going through like that. Still see those. And then the bottom of your cactus here can just kind of go like this. It's going to be going into the soil here. Going to be a little shadowed because it's tucked under a little bit. You can always use your eraser if you get too much shading in there. You can go like that. Take a little bit of it out. It's a nice thing about working with pencil. You can always change your mind and erase it. Do it again. Now I'm not going to fuss a lot more with this. You can fuss all you like later. We're going to go on and finish the sciencey part. I think I'll clean this up a little bit up here with my eraser. Let me show you how to do the spines, and then you can work as much as you want. I'm going to do a couple rows like this, and then I'm going to leave it. I'm not going to put all the needles on every single rib here. If we look at a photograph, we can see that the needles on a saguaro are centered on little dots. Every little dot has a little circlet of needles coming out. See, there's a circle, things coming out like that. So all down the spine, or the ridge here, we have basically circles. And as I said, I'm not going to draw all these in. There's some going out in the arms also. And then you can kind of go like that, make the needles coming out from that. Of course, needles are kind of like the leaves. On another plant, they'd be leaves. But on a saguaro, if it had leaves, the leaves would lose too much moisture, because that's what leaves do. Leaves have little holes in the bottom called stomata, and they're constantly losing water. And that's by design. They're supposed to do that because that begins the process of how the water comes up through the roots. The fact that the leaves are constantly losing water, the water has to be replaced. Where does it come from? It eventually pulls it up from the roots. So leaves are supposed to do that, but in the desert, you don't want a lot of water leaking out. So the leaves are nothing more than a little spine. Now these spines or needles, they do help provide a little bit of shade, just a tiny bit. When the sun hits, you will get a little bit of shade being produced. Not a whole lot, but a little bit. It does help a little. And of course, the spines are a great deterrent to animals that might like to take a big bite out of the saguaro. Now, some animals still do peck it and eat it. Doesn't deter everyone, but it is somewhat of a deterrent, so it's kind of like a defense mechanism for the plant. On the top, you can make them look like they're coming out there. And I'll show you on the side, we can make sure we get some coming off so it looks bristly on the side there. Now I'm going to ask you to resist the temptation to put all of your spines on at this point. If you're working by yourself and you want to pause the video, that's fine, but if you're working in a classroom situation, we're just going to let you finish this up. Now that you know how to do this, you can, on your own, when we're done with the drawing, you can go back and you can fill in as many of these as you want to. But right now we are going to go on, and I think we'll find out what is inside this cactus if we take a slice through it. And for that, we're going to go over here to these little circles. And first I'd like to show you a picture, an actual photograph of what we would see if we sliced this cactus. You would see something like this. Might remind you of a pineapple a little bit, but so these are the little indents that we drew. It goes in, and right in the center we have this ring of little dots. And what these are, the dark dots, these are a little piece of some what they call ribs that go up. So a rib would go like this. And they are very woody. They're the only part of the cactus that's actually a lot like wood. In fact, when the cactus dies and it dries out, these are the only things that are going to be left. You'll find these wooden ribs lying around in the ground. You might not know what they are, but they can be used even as firewood. So they're actually kind of woody, and that's what helps give the cactus its strength. Here's a picture of a dead saguaro, and these are the ribs right here. You see, it was this big originally. It was a nice big thick cactus, and as you can see, it's kind of falling apart. So the outer part has already fallen off down here. It's probably lying in pieces on the ground, and these are the ribs. Now, what this shape allows the cactus to do is to get bigger and smaller very easily and very quickly. Now, here's one more picture of the cross section. You can see, oh, I get a really good shot of those little things with the spines coming out, little circles with the needles. So these indents right here, this is very deep. They're like a pleat, maybe you'd say. They can move apart. These two could move apart and expand. This whole shape is like an accordion. It can expand, and I can show you a demonstration of this. Let me back out a little bit. I made a piece of paper to represent their cross section. I mean, these are kind of pointy. Maybe you'll imagine them be a little more roundy. So this is where the spines would be coming off at the tips here. Okay, so there's our cross section. And so the ribs would be in the middle, right here. This would be your circle. I can't actually put the ribs. Well, actually, maybe I could draw it right here. There's our circle of ribs. And there's our cross section. So when it rains, the stem, and that's what this is, a stem, the stem has to suck up all that water and hold it. And this area here, the yellow part, this is where it's going to hold the water. And so what it does is it sucks it up, and these can stretch like this. The whole cactus can stretch like this. And so these will get, you see how they're getting kind of less pointy? Okay, it's just a paper model. Now this doesn't change. These ribs stay right like this in here. But the rest of it can get bigger all around the outside. Like that. And then when it gets dry again, and the cactus starts using that water, it starts shrinking, and it can shrink back down and get very small, like that. And again, the ribs stay the same, they don't change. You see that again? Water expands it like that, and then when it gets dry, it can shrink. So that's the reason behind the shape of the cross section. So over here, we're going to draw, see on the bottom, we're going to draw one with it all expanded, and on the top here, one with it smaller. So let's draw an arrow over from this cross-section sheet. Actually, if you want to do something really tricky here, let me see if I can zoom in. You can make an arrow that's like in perspective. If you draw two little lines out like this, and then imagine, see how this line's going like this, make a parallel line that's going the same way, like this. You see how this line and this line are exactly going the same way? Okay. And then put a little dot right here. Imagine it's right in the middle of these two lines, like this. And then go like this. Make it into an arrow. Go to the ends. There. And that will show us that this is what we're going to see, the cross section. Alright, so on the top here, we're going to make one that's very, pleats are very deep, like this. Looks like a lot of points coming up like that. So this is kind of like before it rains. You could write before rain. And then it rains down here. In fact, I'm going to draw kind of a circle around it. Give me a kind of target for where I'm going with these lines. I'm going to make it expanded like this. This is just a guideline. And then I'm going to try to make the same number. Let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Did I get right? 1, 2. Okay, so I drew 9 of these. So I'm going to draw the same number here. 1, 2. Whoops, I got like one more in there. But you get the idea. Even if it's not the exact right number, it's okay. There we go. So those pleats have opened up. I can erase my guideline when I'm done. Absorbed all the water. Now it's this shape. So this would be after rain. In fact, we can draw an arrow down. After rain. So it goes like that and like that. Actually, it can go both ways, right? It can go, then it'll get dry and be before rain again. Now we can add a little bit of color to our cross section. The green part, as you saw in our photographs, was the outside. You can see that really well in this one. You see how this is the green, and there's a reason it's green. This is where photosynthesis is going on. It doesn't have leaves, so this is where all the green cells are going on. And then this is kind of a yellowish white in here. So we could do this in our cross sections. Make this right inside. First little bit there, green, light green or dark green. I guess I'm using kind of a light green. Doesn't matter, whichever color green. And you can actually, if you have a brown handy, you can make these ribs, these little dots down here, kind of a brownish color or tan. I'm going to label mine. I'm going to write woody ribs because they're kind of wood-like. Like the word wood with a Y on the end. Woody ribs. And then it's kind of more of a yellowish, tannish in here. Not too yellow, just slightly kind of yellowish around here. Maybe kind of a tannish inside or something like that. Just a little light color, not too heavy. The same here. And I'm not going to label my ribs up here. I labeled them down there where I had space, but of course they're the same thing up here. Now let's talk about the roots. Speaking of bringing water in, it needs to bring water in very, very quickly. And so the strategy that the saguaro uses is to have very shallow roots. A lot of them are very shallow. So we need to draw the surface of the ground like this. It can be bumpy or straight, however you want. That's the ground. And then you can use a regular pencil, or you can use a brown or a tan or something to put some roots in. And we're not going to see quite all of the roots because the roots are going to be as wide as the cactus is tall. So if our cactus is about as tall as this pencil, the roots will go out like this, kind of off the paper. So we're going to draw as much as we can of the roots. And they're going to be very shallow though. So real life measurement says here about, well, I don't have it on there, about 4 to 6 inches, which is about, I don't know, 10 to 20 centimeters. Basically about as deep as your hand. If you put your hand down in the dirt, the roots aren't really any deeper than your hand, which is very shallow considering the size of the cactus. Now it would have one root down the center, one taproot sometimes, but still not very deep, maybe a foot or two. I mean less than a meter. It might have one taproot, and we're not going to see the whole thing. Actually you can see my over there. One taproot. You can put 2 feet or less than a meter, whichever you would prefer. How deep it is, which, considering how tall the saguaro is really not that deep. Okay, so it's going to kind of go off the page there. We're not going to see all of it. And then out like this. Now, you don't have to follow right along with me. You can make yours kind of look however. Just make some roots going like that, and then as long as it's got a lot of roots going off like that, make another one going out. Lots of little tiny roots, and then there'd be root hairs. The really important part you can't even see. You're going to have microscopic root hairs going out, so that the surface area, that's the key. You want a lot of surface area. You want a lot of root hairs going out to suck up that water as fast as you can. You know, within less than an hour. Basically just as soon as that rain comes down. Just almost as fast as an animal could drink. So to catch it, you want to be close to the surface. You can see that, okay. Again, you don't try to make yours look just like mine. Just draw your own root shapes on your paper. That. I'm going to make a few more kind of going out like that. And I want to show you a picture of a real root system. Here's a saguaro that fell over. Someone took a picture of the roots. You can't really see which one is the taproot, can you? And they look like they might be deeper than 6 inches. I don't know, but anyways, there's a real saguaro root ball. Now let's use this space right over here. You see right there? We're going to zoom in and we're going to draw a baby saguaro. So right here, let's draw a 1-year-old saguaro, little tiny like this. Maybe like 1 year. I'll put 1 YR. And then it says here at 2 years old, they're about 1 centimeter or 1/2 inch, something like this. That. 2 years. Maybe you can draw a 3-year-old one. Tiny, tiny bit taller. Now that's pretty slow for a plant. That's just about the world record for slow. Most plants grow a lot faster than that. If you saw a tiny thing like that, you wouldn't guess it was 3 years old. Well, these things are a little bit delicate while they're growing. They really don't survive unless they happen to start growing underneath the protection, like of another plant, underneath the edge of a bush or the edge of a rock or something. They kind of need to be sheltered for a while when they're really tiny. So it's best if the seed falls right there underneath something else. Out in the open, they're probably not going to survive it. They may get stepped on, or they could be eaten. Something that tiny probably doesn't have very sharp spines yet, and that's a nice little bit of yummy, wet, the moisture. There's moisture inside of it, and so the desert animals that are looking for moisture when it's not rained, the cactus is a very good source of moisture, and so that thing is going to be gobbled up by some animal. Now let's go right up here, since we are right here, and let's look at this picture. This is a microscopic view, so let's put an arrow over from the side. Let's put a little box, just draw a little rectangle right on the side somewhere like that, and then we're going to imagine that we're expanding it so we could make a kind of an arrow going up like this. Draw a V and turn it into an arrow so it looks like it's getting bigger. Right. No, actually, this box should be a lot smaller. This could be microscopic, but if it's microscopic, we couldn't see it on our page, so we're going to make it visible. But that gives us the idea that we're taking something very tiny, and then we're going to see it large here. So what are we looking at? This is a little slice of the skin, the outer part of the cactus, right near the surface. And so what we have right at the surface, covering the cactus, is this. This is going to be the outside, and then we're going in like this. You see we have a hole. There's a hole going into the cells. Now this layer here is real waxy and waterproof. It's called the cuticle, and desert plants often have a very thick waxy layer. And let's color our thick waxy layer. Let's use maybe a yellow. And then we're going to color code this. The first box is thick waxy layer of cuticle. Put a yellow in that box. And that helps guard against leaking too much water out through between the cells. You can even feel this on a lot of like succulent plants. You can feel it feels kind of thick and slippery. And then let's color these right here. You see, there's two special cells around the hole. This hole is called the stoma. Can you write it really small? S-T-O-M-A. And a lot of times you see it in its plural, stomata. But this is the stoma. And you do need to have some air. It needs some carbon dioxide to go in here, and water vapor. When it rains, it would like to have water go in here to keep it moist. And so these cells can open and close this hole. They are called guard cells. And let's make our guard cells maybe an orange. Now these cells aren't really orange, but this is a diagram and we have to color code things. So those are our guard cells. So the hole is called the stoma and the cells are called guard cells. So these guys can expand and shrink, kind of like we saw with the cross section there. They can pump water in or out of their cells to make them get bigger or smaller to control the size of the hole. And so this is especially important when it's very dry. You want the hole closed, and you might want to open the hole at night when it's much cooler. That would be much safer. So oftentimes these holes, these stomata holes, will be closed during the day. And then you have a special layer right here. Let's make these kind of light green. This top layer of cells is called the epidermis. Just means outer skin. Maybe that was an epidermis too. This is the place where you find a lot of chloroplasts, and also in some of these too. So I'm going to take the dark green now. Actually, this is light green. Okay, so epidermis was light green. I went kind of lightly, and now we're going to make a part inside the cell called the chloroplast, and this is where photosynthesis occurs. So make some dark green dots inside these epidermis cells like this, and also there would be some inside these too. As you get deeper inside, they're called parenchyma or parenchyma cells, and so we'll color those in just a second. Let's finish with these dark green. So the chloroplast, the last one on the list there, make that dark green, the chloroplast. And I do want to make these green because they are green. This is what gives plants their green colors, these little dots. And these are like little factories. This is the area inside these green dots. This is the part of the cell that takes the sunlight and the carbon dioxide and turns them into sugars. This is where the magic happens, photosynthesis. This is what makes plants able to not have to eat. They make their own food in those little green dots. Okay, so there's a chloroplast. And then let's take something else, maybe like a light tan or something. You could take a pink maybe, or something very light colored. I don't want to color over the dots. I want to be able to see the green dots. These are the middle cells. Now in a leaf, this is very similar to a cross-section of a leaf. If you've done some botany, you'll recognize this. You'll say, wow, this looks like the cross-section of a leaf. Well, it has to, because the cactus doesn't have leaves, right? This is what you would see in a normal plant. This would be the leaf. But in a cactus, the stem basically does the leaf's job with photosynthesis. So you're going to see a very similar pattern here. This, what we're coloring tan, is often called the spongy layer in a leaf, the spongy mesophyll. And it's spongy because we do have some air in here. We have some little air pockets. It's not solid. So So now I think we're ready to talk about the top. What goes on at the top of the saguaro? We're going to draw some flowers and buds here, and then I'll show you up in this section here. Let's back out a little bit. I'll show you right up in here. We're going to draw a close-up of a flower. What's inside a flower? So make sure your little flowers stay right about like this, because we're going to use this space to draw a flower. And over in here we're going to draw one of the fruits. This will be also a close-up. So let's finish the top of the cactus here. And I recommend making a little guideline like this. So if you could see the top, which we're not going to see much of, it goes something like this. Get rid of my crumbs there. Something like that. Okay, but we're gonna probably not even be able to see much of that. Let's imagine that these pleats go up like this. And then along the top of the pleats, we're going to find some buds that are going to become flowers. And let me show you a couple pictures so you know what we're drawing. There's a nice shot. You can see the shape of them, and you notice how they're on these ridges like this. And there's a little one starting out. It just looks like a little maybe a light bulb shape or a pear shape or something, and it gets longer like that. And then eventually, at the top here, this is where the flower is going to come out. It's going to look something like this, like a trumpet shape. And then there's one, I think that's as pretty well as flowery as it gets. That's pretty well all the way open. And let's look at some more here. Almost look like Brussels sprouts in these pictures, little round things. So from the top, the flower looks like that. It's going to have a yellow center. It's a white flower with a yellow center. It's where the little pollen is. And here's another picture. You can see what they look like. Like that. There's one that's just opening. And here's some flowers that bloomed, and they're already wilted. These flowers only bloom for one day, 24 hours. They open usually in the evening, and then they stay open all night. Now, who's going to pollinate the flower at night? The goal of the flower is to be pollinated, and that means that there's dust in here called pollen, which is actually carrying the male genetic information, the male part of the seed. And it has to get down here. We'll find out down here is the female part, the ovary, and this stuff has to get down there. And the way this is going to happen, there's a tube we'll see that goes up through here. Actually, let's go to this picture. This is better. So here we see some bees digging around the flower. Now this would be the next morning. The flower would have opened during the night. The bats have already been here, and the next morning the bees and the birds come and they try to collect some nectar. So the bees are after this nectar way down deep in the flowers, the sweet nectar. That's primarily what the bees are interested in. But on the way down, they brush against all this dusty pollen, and they're kind of careless, and they will all probably hit against this thing. This central thing is a pollen collector. It's the top of the female part of the flower. So the male part is in the pollen. Now, if some of the pollen of this flower gets onto its own collector, nothing's going to happen. But this bee has probably been to hundreds of flowers already, and so some of the pollen that's sticking to it will be from a different flower, and hopefully from a different cactus altogether. So if the pollen from a different saguaro sticks onto here, then the pollen grains will open up and they're able to move down a tube down here. They're actually able to move down into the bottom. So it's good to remember kind of the overview here. The whole point of this pollen stuff is that the saguaro cactus plant needs a way to trade DNA with another saguaro cactus plant. How's that going to happen? So in the animal kingdom, animals can move around. They can go find a mate. But here in the plant kingdom, they've got roots. They're stuck in the ground. What are they going to do? And so the transfer of DNA happens using the pollinators. And so the seed is going to be a combination of the egg of this flower and the pollen of another flower. And this trading DNA, this is what keeps a species healthy. You want to swap DNA with other individuals of your species, and that makes the seed very robust to have a DNA from two different plants. So we'll see some of these inner parts in our cross section. But for right now, what we need to do is draw some of these buds coming off, some little ones, some big ones, and then draw a few that are blossoming into flower. And you can see the texture is like these. It's like if we make upside down U's like this. You see on the side here? I don't know if there's, I think that's the best picture. Maybe in this one you can see a little bit. There's like these kind of texture like that along the sides. So let me zoom in as much as I can. Okay, and I'm going to start making, want to make a little bud here. A bigger one there. We're going to make some of all different sizes. And then one of them here is going to go into a flower. Going to go all the way like this, trumpet-shaped flower. And you can put as many as you want. You can put a few, a lot. I'm going to make one that's just sort of opening up. And as I was saying, these things open up usually in the evening, and the first creature to come and start pollination is usually the long-nosed bat. And the bats reach down and want to suck that sweet nectar. And so they come at night, and then in the morning, the flower is still open. In the morning, some doves perhaps will come, or maybe some bees. Birds or bees will come in the morning, but by late afternoon, by that following evening, the flower's all done. It's starting to shrivel up. It's only out for one day. Now, because it's only out for one day, you've got to make sure it gets pollinated that night. And so these flowers will have a very strong smell. The flower wants to make sure it gets noticed, it gets pollinated. Now, if you want to make your picture look nice in 3D, make some of these buds going behind. Okay, now here, watch what I'm going to do. You see, I already have a big bud right here. But I'm going to put one so you can't see it. Look, it's kind of blocking. It's in front of that one. If you make some that kind of look like they're going behind, that'll make your picture look even more real, because that's what you'd see in a real one. Alright, I'm going to make some more buds down here. Some small ones. Remember, if you change your mind, you can always erase. Maybe I want to make a big bud coming up in front of that one, so I could just erase that one a little bit. And then, of course, down here, you get around to it, you're going to start having spiny things coming down here that I didn't Now we're going to do a close-up, perhaps of this flower maybe. You can imagine it's this one right here. I'm going to back out a little bit so you can see this corner, like that. Okay, so this flower up close, we're going to cut it in half. Look at a cross section. So this will be more of a diagram. So you need to sketch out right about here. You need to do kind of like a funnel shape. Make this light at first. You know where you're going. You can always firm it up. Make like a ball down here. Actually, this would be good. Make an oval kind of down here. And then make it kind of go in like this. Like that. Kind of goes in the middle and then goes out a little bit like that. And it doesn't have to be perfect. Don't worry. I'm sure these flowers are some kind of funny shaped. Bulge there at the bottom. Like that. And then I'm going to make some petals around the top like this. And then we're going to start drawing this internal anatomy. We want to draw an oval down here. And then it has a skinny pipe. Remember I talked about the skinny, just a little skinny like pipe that goes up like this to here. And then the top is kind of a ripply top like that. And inside the bottom oval, this is where we find eggs. This oval is called the ovary. We use the same word as in mammals, except this is a plant. It's still called an ovary. So we could even label this ovary, O-V-A-R-Y, ovary with eggs. Now the egg is the female part. Now, these aren't eggs like chicken eggs, okay? These are just tiny microscopic little gooey dots. So let's label, before we draw the pollen, let's also label that these have names. This pipe is actually called the style, S-T-Y-L-E. And the top of this, the very top, is called the stigma. Stigma, just like it sounds, S-T-I-G-M-A, stigma. Altogether, it's called the pistil. I'm not sure we're going to be able to quite indicate that, but so this is the female part of the flower, that middle thing. And then let's go like this. Watch my pencil. Start right here and draw a line down like this. I'm going to see kind of the outer casing. Down like this. Before you get to the ovary, stop and kind of go like that. And do it on the other side. Like this. Down here, in this little crack down in here, we could even make it a color or something. Maybe make some yellow or something. This is where the nectar is. Deep down at the bottom, nectar, N-E-C-T-A-R, nectar. That's where the sweet nectar is. And then up here we've got, so we're going to draw out the, they're called stamens, and it's like a little really thin stick with, you know, I'm going to use orange, something on the top. See if we can make something out like this, and then they have these. This is where the pollen will be on top of these things. And there's zillions of them, so we can draw them all coming out from here. Of course, this is sort of like a two-dimensional cross section. We're going to, it's just a diagram. They're going to be like over here on the back. You're going to see them covering the back like this. There's just hundreds of them. but they're on the top of a stick like that. And they're called stamens. Let's see, I'm just going to point to them like this. Stay, S-T-A-M-E-N-S, stamens. The top part is called the anther. It's a special name, but this whole, in fact, if you want to make them, maybe I'll just make the stick orange too. The whole structure is called the stamen. And so this is, I'm going to put in parentheses male, M-A-L-E, not M-A-I-L. It's not like the male that comes in the mail. M-A-L-E. And of course the ovary down here, I can put females. Now, very importantly, we got one more label down here. This area down here, and let's make a dotted line around this lump where the ovary is. Round like this, dot, 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 dot. Like this. That is the future fruit. This is the part that's going to grow into the fruit. So I'm going to write future fruit. Inside the dotted line there. So now let's draw the fruit. Let's find out what happens to this lump at the bottom. Let's go over here. In this picture we see an ovary with a wilted flower, and here same thing. The ovary's gotten much larger. This used to be the flower, and it's shriveled and gotten much smaller, and the ovary part at the bottom has grown and grown, and so this is what happens first, and then see the next stage, maybe back here, this one, you can see the fruit turns red and there's the flower still hanging on. This fruit in the middle and this one, these two, the flower, you can still see the flower right there, but it's gotten so ripe that it's popped open and the seeds are coming out. And this is what it looks like when it pops open naturally. It kind of pops open in a threesome, kind of three figure, pops open like that. But if you cut it open, if a human cuts it open, it looks like that. We're going to draw ours kind of looking like that. Kind of reminds you of a watermelon a little bit. There's another picture. You can see again when they pop open by themselves, it kind of does this triangular 3 pattern. There's one that's the ovary's growing, and there's the flower that's shriveled. So we're going to draw a fruit where you can see the outside and a little bit of the inside like this. So right here in this last corner, kind of go like this, draw yourself an oval where the fruit's going to be, something like that. Go ahead and fill up that space. And then go like that. And this will be where it attaches down here. We'll just kind of go like that. We're not going to see it. Draw a line down the middle. So we're going to see this will be our exterior view, and this over here is going to be our interior view. Inside. And then make a shriveled flower coming off the top, just like that. And make it all shrivelly looking like that, something like that. Okay, so that was the flower. Still is the flower. It's shriveled. It's the flower, and let's just put a note here. Ovary grows into a fruit. And what does the outside of the fruit look like? Well, see, it's red with some kind of white dots down here. So how about if we how about make it red? Leave some white dots. In fact, we kind of go like that so we know where we're not to color. Actually, if we kind of go like that, make a little circle around the bottom like that, it'll show up better, like that. Okay. There's our red fruit. And of course, these things, I think they are sweet. The Native Americans that live out in this area of the world, they like to collect them and squeeze them, and they make, I think, jams and jellies out of the juice. And then on the inside we find green, the outer area here, kind of like a watermelon, and then a little bit of yellowy. And then red with some black seeds, so don't make the red too dark just yet. We're going to make, but if you do darken it along the edge there, it'll look better. And then we're going to put some black seeds in. There's a lot of seeds, I think a couple hundred seeds. So a lot of these seeds are going to be eaten. They're not all going to grow. If one of these seeds actually grows into a new cactus, that will be very successful. I think a lot of times none of these seeds are actually going to make it to a full cactus. Some of them would sprout and make baby cacti, but they'll be eaten. There we go. Now you can write inside and outside if you want to. I think it's sort of obvious here that we have kind of an outside view, inside view, but you can write that if you want to. So down here is where it was attached. Obviously, if we were at flower up here, you know, that's the part was sticking off. That's the place where it came off. Of course, they fall off naturally in the wild. They just drop to the ground. The seeds spill out into the soil. And if you want to put these are seeds, you don't have to, but if you want to label that, so seeds. And then that kind of brings us back down to this point. We get a new cactus growing down here. Seeds will fall. Put some seeds on the ground if you want to. That's what happens first, the seeds. And then it grows up and grows into an adult. Now you can go ahead and finish your spines, whatever you want to add in terms of texture, or you can leave it like that. It's up to you.